everyone. Today is our last information session, but don't worry, the work does not stop. And so we'll take the latter part of this meeting to talk to you a little bit about phase 2 and what we're designing, get some of your, well, next week we'll talk about that and spend, quite a bit of time there, get your input. And then, we'll have a calendar, next week with what is to follow. So exciting times as we get ready to move to phase 2. But today we want to talk about higher education. That has been a topic that, we think has intersected with several of our other topics. And many of you have mentioned that you want to hear from those that are either serving with us on the R&R committee or the organizations that they represent. And certainly we know these are not the only institutions of higher education in our community, but certainly two that, have a broad representation of students in this community, and we have relationships with these organizations. So we will move first to Stacy Rostowskis, from the Vice President of Government Affairs, The Ohio State University. Stacy has a presentation prepared for us. Abby, we are going to give you screen sharing. Stacy, you now have the floor, and then we will hear from Dr. Rebecca Butler and Dr. Desiree Pulkerin.
Thanks, Christy, and it's so great to see so many friends on my screen and meet so many new friends and to talk about what I think is a great issue and I think a challenge that we all have, and that's how do we support our community and recover as we recover and remain resilient, become even more resilient post-pandemic. So I thought, even though I know all of you know about Ohio State, that it was important to talk a little bit about how we got to be who we are, what we are today, and then spend a brief little amount of time talking about our response to the pandemic, but most importantly, getting into that recovery and resiliency conversation, and I think the role that we want to play, and then a real dialogue about how we do that and how we do that together. So next slide, Abby. So as you all know, we are originally the Ohio Agricultural and Mechanical College. Maybe you didn't know that. Now known as the Ohio State University, founded in 1870. Our mission, and I'm going to read to make sure I get it right, because I think it's important to hear these words regularly. We are dedicated to creating and discovering knowledge to improve the well-being of our state, regional, national, and global economies. Educating students through a comprehensive array of distinguished academic programs, preparing a diverse student body to be leaders and engaged citizens, fostering a culture of engagement and service. And we understand that diversity and inclusion are essential components to our excellence. This is embodied in our motto, educating students for citizenship, but that mission was developed within the last 5 years, but really grounds the work that takes place today. So next slide, Abby, thanks. So who are we today? We're big, 67,957 total students, 61,000 and change here on our Columbus campus, and then a little over 6,500 on our regional campuses located in Marion, Mansfield, Lima, Newark, and Worcester. Next slide. So of those 67,000 students, 16,246 are minority students. We're proud that this is up 9.4% from last year. And of this number, this includes, I'll give you a few breakdowns. 5,013 are African-American students, an increase of 8.1% over last year. And our Hispanic and Latinx enrollment is also up to 3,555, which is a 7.3% increase. Again, something we're committed to, but we're not where we want to be, but we're committed to increasing those numbers. Next slide. So our graduation rate, it's one thing to be big and to have a lot of students on our campus. It's another thing to graduate them. And again, that's our focus is certainly to increase this graduation rate. The 4-year rate, as you can see, is 68.7. The 6-year rate, 87%. I'd like to say that the reason we have a higher 6-year rate is because more students want to stay to see 2 more seasons of the Buckeyes on the football field. But the reality is we have large engineering program and as well as other programs that do take more than 4 years to complete. So that's why that graduation rate at 6 years is significantly higher. I would also say that the Education Trust recently ranked Ohio State as among the top 5 universities for improving both overall graduation rates for our student body, but also for underrepresented minority students. Our 4-year graduation rate for African Americans has increased from 45.7% to 50.3% over the last 6 years. And the 6-year graduation rate has also increased. It was at 73.4% and now is at 78.4% over the last 5 years. Another really important figure that I wanted to share is our retention rate. One of the most heartbreaking things about when I look at our student populations is when I see students who don't complete their degree. The economic indicators show that again, the value of a college degree, and when you start but don't stop, it's so much harder to recover the debt that might be incurred. So our retention rate for the Columbus campus is 93.9%. This is well above the 4-year averages for public universities, for 4-year colleges and universities. Among our underrepresented minority groups, 94% of African Americans return for their 2nd year, and 90.3% of Latinx students have. So again, I'm really pleased to see that our graduation rate is tracking at, above, or pretty close to our average rate. Next slide. So like all of your organizations, we had to do a major pivot in March 2020. I won't spend a ton of time on this because I know you all have seen and heard about it and have had your own challenges to work through. There are 4 areas of focus that I would say really were at the hallmark of our approach to returning to campus in the fall of 2020. That they centered around testing. We now have a very robust, probably the most robust in the country testing program, where our on and off campus students are tested weekly at in-house facilities here on campus. We have increased safety protocols in and around campus to allow for face-to-face instruction. It's not as high as we'd like, but about 50% of our students receive some sort of face-to-face instruction last semester. And again, we're working as we trend towards obviously the spring semester, but really looking towards the fall. How do we increase the number of students that have face-to-face as a component of their education? The other thing that we're focused on is student support. And again, this pandemic is challenging for many populations, but certainly our students who are sad at the loss of what they thought they would have and their college experience would be at whatever point they have been in their career. So we've been really focused at how do we provide financial, but also support services, mental and physical, again, in this unique environment. I will give a shout out, knowing that this is the focus on local activity, but our federal government has been supportive, and we have been grateful for the support we've gotten through the CARES Act. Last semester alone, we were able to push out $19 million to students for financial aid who were impacted by the pandemic. The next round of the next COVID package has another $21 million coming our way that will go directly to students. So we're grateful for that support. And then finally, focusing on vaccines, how we can do our part, both from the Wexner Medical Center in terms of distribution, but also as a partner, a key partner with this community, with the city and our public health department. All of this is important, and I think for any organization is to be transparent about our approach. And so our dashboard, which is available on our website that I just featured in the last slide, Safe and Healthy Buckeyes, really talks about everything that I just mentioned, you know, our current daily testing and our prevalence on campus, to how many students are in isolation and quarantine. Again, our approach was we want our students to return to campus. We will find dedicated isolation and quarantine space for them. We will test, treat, trace, and take care of them. And so that has been an interesting experience for my colleagues in student life, but one in which we're grateful for, and we know that our students have been grateful for that. So, and once again, we're also grateful for the CARES dollars that has helped to support those efforts. Next slide. So I mentioned partnerships, and I really do want to thank Mayor Ginther and Dr. Roberts, their teams, as well as our neighborhood and community partners. This summer, we really started, Trudy, myself, and others on our team, to have more intentional and regular meetings with our partners in the community, businesses, neighbors, the area commission, and had a focus effort to have a good dialogue about our approach and how we can work and tackle some of the challenges together. We've learned a lot, as I'm sure you all have, about ourselves during this pandemic. And I think as we think about how we make Ohio State more resilient, we know we need to be a great community partner and want to be a part of making this community more resilient. And so one of the ways that when we think about this, not just overall, but also from an equity standpoint, is how can we impact and continue to impact the economy? So next slide. So I thought many of you may have seen this, but in May of 2019, we released an economic impact study that we had conducted that shows that we are the largest employer in Columbus, and we generate on an annual basis $7 billion to this region. This supports just over 67,000 jobs, and the medical center alone generates an additional $7.3 billion and supporting 22,000 jobs. In addition to our local impact, I wanted to share our impact statewide, as I did mention that we have a presence not just at our regional campuses that you can see there highlighted, but also in all 88 counties through our extension offices, as well as hospital partnerships. So $15.2 billion in economic impact to the state of Ohio, over 123,000 jobs, and $679.2 million generated in tax revenue for state and local tax revenue. So to put all of this into context, that's okay, I mean, you don't need to go back. I just want to say 1 in 57 jobs in the state was either directly or indirectly supported or sustained by the university. Now we can move on. So I think this is my favorite slide in the deck, because I've talked about what we are and what we do today, but this is about what we're going to be tomorrow. And I think the opportunity that we are embarking upon to build upon, expand our innovation, the innovation and entrepreneurship activity that we already are blessed to have in Columbus, but we want to amp that up a bit. So what you're looking at is our innovation district. And this is Lane Avenue, as you can see at the bottom, looking, I guess it would be looking east, and you can see the Olentangy River winding its way in this nightscape, the Ohio Stadium and the Lincoln Memorial Towers just at the top left of the screen, and maybe if you squint the downtown in the distance there. Ohio State is excited about expanding our innovation ecosystem with 3 real goals. Innovation, as I've just said, educating more students and creating new employment opportunities for talent and growth. We want to produce more graduates to come into this community and become great citizens that generate revenue. And then not just the people, but generate economic growth for our region. So we want to attract new corporate partners who would like to locate next to one of the nation's most comprehensive research-intensive universities, but right in the middle of Ohio. So this innovation district, which again, you'll hear more about in the coming days as formal launches commence, But it really, I do think, has an opportunity, and we want to make a contribution to the city of Columbus's resiliency and recovery, because none of us work in a vacuum, of course, and we're thinking hard and deep about how to do this in an equitable way. I'll say a couple of other things. You know, again, not being in a vacuum, we're very cognizant that this is located right along that northwest corridor growth that we're excited to see. We estimate that that this will be a net gain, of course, for the city in terms of income tax receipts. Already, from The Ohio State University in 2010, we generated $33 million in income tax receipts for the city. In 2018, that jumped to 61 million. So just think about the growth that took place from 2010 to 2018. And now we're launching, you know, an equally aggressive agenda. So we expect that in this picture, you'll see at least 10,000 new jobs with additional 15 million in tax revenue, and it's just an exciting project to be a part of. So it's exciting. You can, even though I want to linger here, would love to. We should probably jump to the next slide. It's exciting, but we want to make it exciting for all. And one of the things that, and I'm so excited to be able to present with our colleagues from Columbus State, is that Ohio State has already and certainly really thought about this prior to growth that I just talked about. But we need to have pathways and pipelines into Ohio State, and those are critical to our success. So our biggest community, our biggest partner in terms of those pathways is Columbus State, with 82 pathways that come directly to Ohio State. Everything from actuarial science to zoology, A to Z and in between. I'll say that that innovation district, one of the areas where we're going to grow, as I think I mentioned, is by increasing the number of graduates that we produce. Of the areas and the degrees in which we're targeting for growth, at least 5 of them already have pathways where a student would start at Columbus State, achieve their associate's degree, and come to Ohio State to finish the bachelor's degree. We've made that a seamless process over the years, thanks to the state of Ohio encouraging us about 20 years to do that. And it's a really important pipeline that only has opportunity for growth. And President Johnson has been on the phone with Dr. Harrison, and you know, our teams talk regularly, and we're very excited about the opportunities here. 2 others that I'll mention just quickly. I mentioned extension a little bit ago in all 88 counties. That includes right here in Franklin County. And we're really grateful for the support and the connectivity that they bring in helping us stay connected to this community. And finally, something that you probably haven't heard much about, but it's a place where you'll hear more, is certificates and credentials. So we have more than 160 academic certificate programs where it's not a 4-year degree. And I think this is a real opportunity for both the state of Ohio and certainly for Ohio State to really help learners, whether they're mid-career or started or want to change their careers, at least get their toe in the water. And so, you know, I'm excited to talk more about that, and I think this is another area for growth for us. Next slide. So one of the, I think, a model program that we could take a look at, and I would love to emulate, is the J.P. Morgan Chase Global Career Readiness Initiative. This is a $7 million investment that you all may have heard about, that involves all of the partners on this slide. We were one of 10 cities selected by J.P. Morgan to really focus growth in graduates who have information technology, advanced manufacturing, and healthcare in programs. And this is you know, one where the pathway starts not just at the higher ed level, but it's starting in K through 12. So excited that Columbus City Schools is a part of this, and I think again, we're delighted to partner, again, public-private together, to really say, okay, how can we, with real targeted investment, grow our future leaders in these fields? And finally, So I think, I hope I've quickly given you a snapshot of who we are, how we got to be, and where we're going to go. But the thing that is, I think, different about this point in time, and certainly this committee is really looked at it, is how do we grow as an equitable economic engine? I've listed on this slide a number of initiatives underway. The Wexner Medical Center has had a really targeted, aggressive approach on an anti-racism action plan. The university has a task force on racism and social inequities that you see Tom Gregoire, the dean of our College of Social Work, James Moore, the head of our Office of Diversity and Inclusion, are heading up. We have really put our money where our mouth is and awarded seed funding for racial justice initiatives that require having a community partnership. And I was just reviewing that list, and it's really impressive because it's diverse in the approach, as well as, again, our other initiatives that I put Education for Citizenship there. That's another collaboration between Arts and Sciences, the Glenn College of Public Affairs, ODI, our office, to talk about things like civility and how can we restore faith in our democracy, and bring our experts that work on those issues every day to our students, to our community, to explore much needed conversations, particularly over the last few months. But I'll go back to the question and pose it really to this group, because I do hope we have some time to have a discussion, whether it to be today or later. We know that we will not grow. We need you and we need our community partners to grow as an equitable economic engine, and that we need to do it together. And as President Johnson said in a meeting that I was just in with her a couple of days ago, no more silos. She was talking about Ohio State because we tend to have a lot of them. But I would frame that to us as a community. We shouldn't have these silos. And I think part of my job, Trudy's job, is to try to break it down and reach out our arms together. But I'm excited to hear the feedback that this group has for all of us, but also specifically for the university. So happy to answer questions now, or Christy, Hannah and Christy, whatever the format is. But this concludes my formal presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy. And I apologize. I messed up your formal title. You were an executive vice president. I apologize. You got promoted. You got kicked up since I worked with you. That's awesome. We're going to we defer questions until after Dr. Butler's presentation, and then we'd like to have the questions come from the group to both of you. So we will now move to Dr. Butler. Thank you, Stacy.
Thanks, Christy. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for giving Dr. Polk-Bland and I just a little bit of time to share with you, where Columbus State has been and what we're doing, really in service to Central Ohio and especially the Columbus area, especially over the past year in the pandemic. I am going to share my screen and you all are going to tell me if it's working. How about that? And then, do you see a big PowerPoint, yes or no?
No.
Ah, okay. Okay, we're going to try this again. Okay, now?
We're good.
Okay, excellent. Thanks for everyone's patience. Now you should see it big. Okay, fantastic. Thanks, everyone. So before we get into where Dr. Polk-Bland and I want to focus our conversation with everyone today is really on the effects COVID-19 and the pandemic have had on our student population. But some context before we get there. Columbus State is a microcosm of the Columbus community. We enroll annually 45,000 members of our community from Franklin County and the surrounding counties. We do attract students from all 88 counties in Ohio, but the disproportionate number come from Franklin County and the surrounding counties. When we think about the city of Columbus and we think about Franklin County and the demographic makeup of the area, we enroll proportionately to the demographic makeup. So we are an incredibly diverse institution, both in terms of race, ethnicity, and income. And some additional information here, we enroll more DACA students and understand that, you know, really documenting DACA students and tracking DACA students for a lot of really good reason is sometimes difficult to do. But we enroll more than any other institution like us in the state of Ohio. We are an incredibly diverse institution. And this diversity and us being a microcosm of the Columbus community is going to come back when we get into the data, because what we see in our Columbus community in terms of the effects of the pandemic, we are seeing in our student population. As Stacy indicated, we have a strong, long partnership with the Ohio State University and other higher education institutions. The Ohio State University is our strongest partner by far, and are delighted to be partnering in the work that Stacy indicated, as well as many other areas of partnership to strengthen educational opportunities, and especially equitable educational access opportunities for our institutions and for our community. So as we get into the data, just want to again emphasize that as the city of Columbus goes, as Franklin County goes, so too does Columbus State. So as we entered into the pandemic, our enrollment, again, 45,000 students annually. It looks at, you know, on a semester basis, about 27,000 students enrolled in any semester. We came into the pandemic from an enrollment standpoint very strong, and we continue to be strong by comparison. However, what you see in this data, and we'll go through these charts relatively quickly, but want to point out several items within the data where we're starting to see and have seen the disproportionate effect of the pandemic in our Black and Brown communities. So as you think about and look at enrollment overall, for our autumn 20 enrollment, we were basically flat overall, but proportionately our Black African American students enrolled at a less degree, and so too did our Hispanic Latinx students. So the pandemic, even before we got to, you know, kind of enrollment and thinking about you know, higher education in general, our communities of color were already seeing the disproportionate effect of COVID-19. So again, as we look at spring 21, that's the semester that we're in now, are even more striking. And I should pause here and want to pause here and let the task force members know that Columbus State has been on a 15+ year journey in equitable student success outcomes for our students, and most recently within the past several years, addressing holistic student success. So that's academic success and life success. So really integrating what are the barriers and what do we need to be doing in terms of high impact practices to ensure that our Black and Brown students are succeeding and succeeding at the same rate as our white students, and what are we doing to remove barriers and ensure that help is unavoidable at the systemic level for all of our students, again, in housing, transportation, food, and childcare. So even with that work, and we have made significant strides in that work, we have consistently over the past some years prior to the pandemic graduated the most diverse classes of students every graduation period, and we graduate students 2 times a year. We have made significant strides in student success rates in college level English and college level mathematics, certificate degree attainment and degree attainment among our Black and African American students and our Latinx students, in some cases and across some metrics where we have closed the opportunity gap, or we were within striking distance of closing that opportunity gap, which is so critically important for the success of our entire community. And then COVID. And so what are we seeing now? So as we move into spring, what we're seeing is that overall our enrollment is decreasing. So that's regardless of race, ethnicity, any other demographic characteristic. What we know is that overall, the biggest loss in enrollment is occurring between the 20 to 29-year-old age range. So as we think about the previous conversations we've had in this room, and many of us are having conversations in other rooms, we know that that is the age group where many of our frontline workers, hospitality workers, food service, other industry segments have been really, really impacted by COVID-19. And that has shown up in our data overall. And what we're seeing, again, when we disaggregate our data, which we routinely do to monitor and continue to improve and make step changes in student success, is the real effect of COVID-19 for our Black Latinx students. So even though our white student population was down 7%, look at the Black and African American Latinx change just in 1 year. So College Credit Plus, for those of you that may not be as familiar with College Credit Plus is State of Ohio's legislated dual enrollment opportunities for our secondary systems. College Credit Plus gives students who are college ready the opportunity to take college level courses while they're still in high school. We could have a whole other conversation about equity considerations with College Credit Plus, but we're happy to report that we are in really good conversation with our secondary systems, with Ohio Department of Higher Education, Ohio Department of Education, about how we really improve equity outcomes for College Credit Plus in general. What's important in this slide is just to draw folks' attention to the fact that during the pandemic, our white students who are enrolled in College Credit Plus have increased their participation, and our Black and Hispanic students have decreased their participation in College Credit Plus. Yet another marker as a microcosm of the Columbus community, the disproportionate effect that COVID-19 is having in our Black and Brown communities. Now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Desiree Polk-Bland, who's our Vice President of Student Affairs, to talk about how we address some of these really critical issues for us with respect to CARES Act funding and student success. And then I'll come back at the very end and talk just briefly about what we're doing in partnership with many of you in this room to address some of the concerns that we've outlined relative to COVID-19.
Thanks, Dr. Butler. And so we'll start with our CARES Act fund. So as Stacy talked about, the federal government did assist. So Columbus State was awarded $6 million in the spring, and that money was the money that would directly go into the hands of students. And so we wanted to make sure, because of COVID, be our saying here, because our students needed financial support. So reduction in our students' work. So reduction in hours or losing jobs was a factor. And so we were trying to, with the awards of the funds, how do we get money directly into their hands and organized a way to do that? So if you look at the data, we wanted to say, what's the impact of actually getting these dollars? And so when you go through the impact, you can see that for the spring 20, we first got the money, we distributed it in spring. The course success rate, so this is in comparison to all of our students who received the CARES Act money, their course success rate was higher. And then we looked at their retention, like did they return in the summer? So summer enrollment is not guaranteed. Some people take the summer off, especially during the pandemic. But when you look at the data, our students who received the CARES Act money, who were supported financially, were able to re-enroll in summer. And then they were also at higher rates than other students. And then in autumn term, right, it sort of evened out, but it's still slightly above the students who actually received the emergency relief grant from the CARES Act money. So we know that there's an impact of being able to just have breathing room for whether that be rent, food, whatever, to maintain your college enrollment. And then we did the same tracking with the students who received CARES Act money in the summer. So when we look at summer, the rates are, the success rates are close to even there, but the summer students who returned in autumn term, you will see those recipients of the actual funds, the distribution of funds, the retention was impacted. So we know that there was definitely a financial need for our students, and that need, meeting that need, allowed them to return. And we also do know that our minority students were overrepresented in the number of requests that we received for CARES Act funding and received CARES Act funding. So on our next slide is the breakdown of the race ethnicity comparison, where you can see, and it is small, so I hope you can see, where when you look at Black students made up approximately 20% of the population, right? But represented 40% of the group receiving emergency relief grants. So they're overrepresented in receiving the grants, but it also helped in their persistence to their degree and their retention rates. And so our CARES Act distribution, we really are looking at how do we then, and you're right, there's going to be another distribution of CARES Act funding, but the difference that it makes to be able to support students financially, dollars in hand to meet their needs, really impacts their ability to maintain their enrollment. And this slide really is about what we've learned from the COVID-19 and the distribution of funds, right? So, we know that students need the support to stay engaged. Looking at our retention rates to understand that in comparison to the entire population, they had higher retention rates of returning. So the support is definitely needed. We also know that students have multiple needs. So the example of, we are trying to support students with food, housing, the use of technology. Those were the top 3 requests when we had people fill out a brief application for funding, because we wanted to learn what is it that you need. So the top 3 requests for the academic support were around really having academic support, including the technology, and then having enough money for food and enough money for housing. And we needed to prioritize how we were going to support students. So solving multiple issues, meaning if a student has a housing insecure and they need technology, how are we at Columbus State working with our partners to ensure that we can loan technology and work with partners to have students to have a place to use that technology? And during COVID-19, that was really difficult because places were shut down. You couldn't go to a Starbucks and sit down and get Wi-Fi. So working through those access problems and those multiple needs for students. We also discovered that, we really have to continue beyond the CARES Act, federal government funding. How do we continue to support students with these emergency needs? Because our students literally are a flat tire away from dropping out. It takes one bill that they can't pay, that they then have to drop their classes, work more hours in order to make ends meet. And so how do we help them get that one thing paid off so that they can continue their enrollment? Because in continuing their enrollment, we know will lead to certificate or degree attainment, which will lead to economic mobility. We're trying to really make sure students are self-sufficient at the end of this. We need to expand our eligibility requirements. We learned that too. Rebecca mentioned that we serve the highest population of DACA students, right? So with the CARES Act funding came this requirement of Title IV eligibility. And they are not Title IV eligible by mere DACA status. And so finding funding to support other students who don't meet that criteria. And by the way, there are other students for multiple reasons who cannot prove Title IV eligibility, meaning if you can't complete the FAFSA in a way because you are homeless or detached from your guardian or parent, and you can't get that tax, there are ways that you can't show your eligibility. So how do we support students who really just cannot complete that and show that Title IV eligibility? And then moving forward, so we're in COVID now, but beyond COVID, the goal really is to increase college-wide awareness and community awareness of students' needs and the intersection of multiple needs. So the food, the housing, the emergency aid, need for technology, healthcare, transportation, our students have them all. We know that we lose students who are in good academic standing. It is not an academic barrier of why they're dropping out, but they're dropping out. And when we reach out and survey students, it is these are the needs. I need to work more hours. I need to support my family. I need to do things in a different way. And so how do we support their needs so they can maintain their student status? We are also working on how do we actually do and make help unavoidable. But we need to know what students need. So how do we customize the support services for them through sort of basic needs assessment? Let us know what you need in technology, childcare, what do you need so we can start to customize, package and bundle services for support. And then student technology needs, it's a greater conversation, a need for devices, a need for broadband access. And we also have populations who just don't use technology on a regular basis. So there's a need for training on how to use the devices that we actually loan from them. So we're working on what we've learned and then how we move forward to support our students.
Okay, thank you. I'm operating on two screens here, so it's a little bit of a challenge. You're seeing my technology challenges come into full view today. But so thank you, Desiree. We really wanted to focus on a snapshot of the effects of the pandemic with our student population, which we can't emphasize enough is our community's population. These are people from all age groups who have self-selected in to say, I want to be part of this community, and I want to do so by getting education that leads either to a transfer to The Ohio State University and other higher education partners, or I want to contribute to the workforce, and I want to do that and care for my family and my immediate neighborhood. And so what we've seen is what has been in this room since we started to come together. We also want to then just give one area that we are focusing on today, because we know it has come up in some of these meetings previously, and also other rooms that we have all been in. And what are we doing for our high school seniors and our K-12 students that are at risk of not being able to participate in the way in our community and our economy in the way in which they might have been perhaps prior to the pandemic. So many of you in this room are already in conversations with us and we with you about really focusing in, especially in Columbus City Schools and several other districts in the Franklin County area, for us to do to really work with students, not only to get them enrolled in college, that's just part of it, but to really address at the family unit, what are the needs, what are the barriers, how can we come together in partnership in this community to help families out of this pandemic, and do so in a way that that ensures that there's equitable access to participate in higher education and to participate in the workforce that again leads to inclusive economic prosperity for everyone in our community. So how are we doing that? Again, working with community partners, working with Columbus City Schools and other school districts in our area. We are making a 3-year commitment at Columbus State Community College to hire and resource individuals and teams to help students and their families, because we know now that what we're seeing in our current students and the disproportionate effect in our current students is magnified in our community by the numbers of young people and individuals in general who have been foreclosed from higher education because of the effects of the pandemic. And so this is one of many ways in which we are working to solve and to be resilient and recover as a community together. And so with that, I think we will finish, and thank you for giving us a little bit of time to share our experiences with COVID-19. And then Christy, I think we'll open it up for discussion.
Absolutely, thank you. Questions from our committee? Let me see, I can't see everyone, so let me get to it. Here's the committee. Does anyone have any questions? Oh, come on.
I don't have a question necessarily, but I do have a comment to say that I am very impressed and I feel a lot better that OSU and Columbus State are working so closely together. In my particular neighborhood and in most communities, that's the starting point, Columbus State. And to know that they can move on to Ohio State is a wonderful thing to know. Another concern we have is that a lot of our kids are not necessarily college-bound kids. Some of them need to go into the trades. I'm hoping that there'll still be some emphasis on that for children that want to be wage earners. So at any rate, thank you for all of that and your efforts, and the community appreciates it.
Thank you, Mrs. Barnes. Rachel Lustig, did I see your hand up?
Oh, can you hear me? All right. First off, I just want to say thank you to Dr. Butler, Dr. Polk, and to Stacy for your excellent presentations. I thought they really presented the information at very important but rather complementary and different ways of looking at it. This time has been really interesting in that we've been looking at our community from such different perspectives, and I thought that Dr. Polk-Bland kind of brought them together by talking about the intersection of challenges that your students are facing. As we move from a place of learning to a place of what do we do about it, what might you guys recommend are some of like the principles or goals or values through which we look at that, like taking into consideration all that we talk about and all that you intersect with when we make these decisions and cuts about resiliency? What values should drive our recommendations?
So I'll start, and then I think really, Rachel, this is a really great question for this entire task force. But first of all, I would like to address Ms. Barnes' comment about skilled trades and going directly into the workforce. What we didn't talk about today, both with the Ohio State University and with Columbus State, is the work that we're doing with the employers in our community to really develop demonstrated high income, direct to the workforce careers for students and young people that are coming from high school. So that exists now, and it's also emerging work and emerging partnership. When Stacy talked about some of the certificates, there's going to be more to come on that partnership, certainly in the near future. But how are we addressing exactly what you commented on around ensuring that young people and people in our community that want to and have expertise in for example, skilled trades, construction management, culinary, et cetera, that we have opportunities and equitable opportunities for them as well. So more to come, but we have a lot of work in that regard with our employer partners. I think what, Rachel, to get to your question, which is really a provocative and a great one, is I think, Christy knows that I've been, emailing her and private messaging her through this entire time together, because it is absolutely evident that this has not been an equitable situation prior to the pandemic. We do not have an equitable kind of systems, and focusing on that, I think is something that should guide us from a guiding principle standpoint. That the recovery, we need to focus on the disproportionate, effect that this pandemic has had in our neighborhoods and in our communities, in our Black and Brown communities, and really understand what that means in an integrated way. I think what's beautiful about this task force is we have the opportunity to integrate everything that we're doing and really address this holistically. And I think that's what is some of what was highlighted today and in some previous conversations. Catholic Social Services has been a partner with us for many years, and when we can partner together, we can do so much more.
I would love to associate myself with Dr. Butler's remarks, because I agree 100%. The thing that I would add to that is to specifically call out the role that education plays. It's often said education is the great equalizer, but if we take it for granted, it won't be, or it won't have the investments or the resources that it needs. And I'm not just doing this selfishly about Ohio State, and I bring our K through 12 partners into this. But I think, what role does education play in the recovery? And if, the programs that we've mentioned, I work in government affairs, I can tell you government had to push us harder on some of these. And I may be careful what I wish for, but I think you as our community, we as a community, need to push all of our educational institutions to be part of this equitable recovery.
Thank you both. Next question.
So it's Angela Brett here. I was reading an article a few weeks ago that talked about the pandemic really propelling the need for short-term certificate programs. So I was very excited, Stacy and Dr. Butler, to hear both higher education institutions talking about that. But can you share a little bit more sort of what it is you're seeing and where those demands are coming from? I can't help but think that they're a little different from areas that we've seen in the past, coupled with the fact that we know the future of work is going to change. And so a number of individuals need to upskill and reskill. So could you just share a little bit more about what you're seeing in that area?
Yeah, maybe I'll go first quickly and say, that I've been around education and higher education long enough to have heard a number of different factors are going to revolutionize or be the big disruptor. Well, COVID has been the big disruptor to higher education. For years, we had faculty dragging their feet saying they didn't want to use technology or in the classroom, and dang it, they are. And we're providing resources to make sure that they can transition their course delivery to a virtual format. It doesn't mean that it's right for everyone or every class, but it's certainly we've shown that we can do it. So I think, to answer your question directly, the silver lining of the pandemic is that we can deliver programs and content in ways that we haven't ever before. So what we call distance education is now Ohio State Online. And then I think, what we're doing is really saying, okay, where do we have excellent programs that can translate well? And then, as Dr. Butler was saying, working with our local and not just local, but businesses all around the country to say, when they come to us and say, hey, we really need a certificate program in this space, what can you do? And before it would take us weeks or months or years to respond. And I will at least tell you, under Dr. Christina Johnson, that's now weeks. And so moving at the speed of business. I also will just say it's not just business though, and I know many of us are all in the nonprofit community, and so I think that's another place where I think we really want to continue to grow. The Glenn College for Public Affairs has a lot of existing certificate programs in this space, and I know we'll see more.
So excellent question. Just briefly for us, the way in which we think about certificates is really around braiding together not only what students are learning inside the classroom, but what they're learning through a variety of earn and learn and apprenticeship models. So the way in which we think about certificates is what leads to a high wage job that can get people into the workforce, and then work with our workforce partners across healthcare, across information technology, advanced manufacturing, construction, skilled trades. There are several others to then put the partnership to use so that we're not putting the burden of financing education on the students, but that we are leveraging tuition reimbursement for companies, that we are putting together our resources that we have at Columbus State and other community resources to really allow for the students seamless learning, seamless earning in the workforce. And when they finish one certificate, then what's the next step? And so when we talk about navigation, we talk about, you know, how we're thinking about the student life cycle. It really is continuous learning. And what's going to be wonderful about the complementary workforce that we're doing, program that we're doing with Ohio State, is it can really be secondary all the way through to, I am now, you know, well into my career and I need to upskill in a different way. The opportunities that this community will have because of what's happening in higher education is going to be really tremendous. And so we're thinking about it not only in terms of first job, second job, but also through the entire life cycle of someone's employment and career.
Thank you both.
I think we have time for maybe one more question with answers before we move to talk about the second phase. Mike Stevens has some things he wants to share with us before we end the day. So is there one last question? Mark Swanson.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. I guess I'm curious if it would be helpful some way to get some of the information about possible certificate programs or even very flexible programs for working students to learn more about that. You know, I think about my team. I have 120 employees in coffee shops around town, and some of them are already your students. A lot of them are trying to consider what they're going to do next. And some of these things that you've brought up are really helpful stepping stones. Is there literature or there links or there things that I could do to share with my team how to access some of this information to make it as easy, barrier-free, as easy and barrier-free as possible?
Absolutely, Mark. Christy and Hannah, why don't we, we'll send all of that information to you, Hannah, and then we can distribute it to the team. And then, I know I speak on behalf of Stacy in this regard. We're happy to have any conversations or work with anyone in this room and many other rooms if you have specific needs or want to talk about opportunities for your employees or whatever have you. So, but we'll get the information out to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mark.
Absolutely. And I would just say, though, you know, as you think about next phases, this is one that we can promote to who we know to promote to, but the group that's assembled here is so comprehensive that I think this is one of those things that it breaks my heart that members of our own community don't know the access and the resources that they have at their own front door or back door or wherever they are. And so that's where I want to say, hey, we could really use your help. right? And I think, and I don't just, I speak for Ohio State, but I think I speak for all of the educational partners here. And if you come to us and say, hey, give us our programs, how can we promote that in a logical but sort of appropriate fashion? So happy to continue this conversation for sure.
Great, thank you. We will take those materials and send those out to the full committee. And Erica Clark-Jones has also put something in the chat that Adam welcomes the opportunity to partner on social work related certificate programs to meet the demands of the growing behavioral health workforce. So there's another potential partner to look for some certificates. I echo, I say ditto to that, Erica, or we support you in that. We will hire the people. Yes. Okay. Well, thank you, Dr. Butler, Dr. Polk-Bland, and Stacy Rostowskis for joining us today. Great presentation. Thank you for kind of wrapping up our informational sessions. We are getting ready to move to phase 2, but before we do, I want Hannah to just give us just a quick overview. The website is now up and active. Yay. It's been a while, but that's okay. It's up before we move to the second phase, and that's the important part of it. So Hannah's going to tell us a little bit about the website and kind of navigate you through that just so you know where it is and where to find it, because it will be important to us as we move through the second phase, I believe.
All right, everybody, this is big news. I'm really excited to share this with you quickly here. The direct link to the website was included in the email that went out yesterday with your meeting materials. But if you lose that link, no big deal. It's super easy to get there. So this is just columbus.gov. Under departments, you'll go to Department of Development. Maybe. Oh, it's waiting. Oh, there we go. Okay. And it's right here on our front page, right here down at the bottom. In our quick link section, you can just click on Recovery and Resiliency. And it's got everything we need on here. So it'll walk you through. It's got our committee's email address. So if the public has questions, this is where they're directed to send their emails. We've got our member roster. So I know I've sent around a spreadsheet to the committee, but now it's out for the general public with everybody's name and organization on it. And most excitingly, we have all of our meeting materials. I know I've sent emails with things, but so I'm done clogging your email inbox now. Everything is organized by meeting. So your framework and the schedule is under our organizing documents, but then each presentation that we have, I won't go through because my computer is being a little bit slow, but you can click on it and it'll pull up the presentation for reference that our presenters used. The presentations from today will be up by the end of the week. So we'll have that updated with Dr. Butler and Stacey's presentations from this afternoon. And then in one handy place, we have our videos. So instead of going to the city's YouTube page and searching for each individual meeting, they are on here. And all you have to do is click on the date and they will start playing. So all of our information is now located in one hub. After you guys have a minute to look through it, if there's any missing information, please feel free to shoot me an email and we'll be happy to update it. And then moving forward into phase 2, we'll continue to keep this website updated with any new materials, links, information that comes forward. But this will be a great hub for this committee and the public and our elected officials to go back and check out the great work that we've done to this point and moving forward. Are there any questions? I can't see anybody, so just speak up. No? All right, well, I'll stop sharing my screen. And if you guys have anything else, just feel free to email me and let me know. But I will turn it back over to Christy.
Thank you, Hannah. Now, I misspoke. Phase 2, we will not meet next week. you all actually are going to get, you're going to get next week off. You're going to be off until, we will not have another full committee meeting until March the 10th. So you get a vacation, but you don't get a vacation without homework. You are going to get some homework. So here are a few things. We'll talk about the homework in a minute, but let me just quickly give you an overview of where we're going before we start phase 2. We're going to be sending out a survey to all of you, so we can ask you to do some prioritization and look at kind of the topics that you what priority order you may put things in, or the intersection of some of the categories, so that we can start putting work teams together. We also may ask you if you're willing to chair a work team. Just know, the way that I am, if you don't chair, and don't try to look away or turn your camera off, I will ask you, or Kinston will ask you, or Hannah will ask you. Trudy, I know I see you ducking. But, that's just how it goes. You all know that. So that is going to happen. You will get the survey on February 19th, thereabouts. So watch for that survey in your mail. You will have, in your email, you will have until March the 1st to get your survey responses back to us. On the week of March the 1st, the city team and I, we're going to work to compile the results of the survey and then develop the framework for the phase 2 meeting. And then we also have to make sure those meetings are staffed. So based on the topics and how the work teams are put together, we'll be selecting staff to help staff the work teams. And then, of course, we will also, as I said, be looking for some sub-work team chairs, if you will. And then on March the 10th, we're going to come back together with Mayor Ginther, Council President Hardin, and Council Commissioner O'Grady. He's not the commission president anymore, but Commissioner O'Grady, to talk about phase 2 and to hear some remarks from them. And they will also, give us any updates that they need to share with, things that are going on in government, and, kind of share some of their vision for phase 2. And then we will begin with full work team meetings March 17th. So it's St. Patrick's Day. We picked that day because you all will remember that day. And, that will be the day that the work teams will start to meet. We will let you organize yourselves. So there may be work teams that say we want to meet on a Friday or a Thursday or what have you. But we'll give you some time to do that between March 10th and March 17th. And then the work teams will meet approximate all of, March 17th through the end of May. And then in early June, you all will come back together. We'll come back together as a full group to share the results of the work teams and, implementation recommendations, any policy recommendations, and that kind of thing. So we'll have a big presentation that, during that week. It may take more than one meeting, certainly. And then the staff will kind of pick up from there to compile some of those implementation recommendations in the event there's legislative action. And of course, if there's budgetary action, they can begin the budget work in August, and they can get any potential legislation can move before the council break. Those things that can move before the council break in July, and those things that have to wait until the fall or the winter, then they will wait till the fall or the winter. So this will be an important time, because this is really where the real work is going to begin. And so the materials that we're going to send to you during this interim period, kind of on your staycation, if you will, you're going to get a racial equity video, because we've been talking a lot about equity. And so the racial equity video, it talks a lot about racism and some of the systemic problems, but it also talks about what equity means. And there's some literacy, racial literacy language there. For some, it will seem very foundational. For others, you will say, I've seen this before and I don't need to see it again. But for many, it will be new. And our goal is to kind of level set it and make sure that we are all kind of operating with some level of literacy and some foundation as we start this next phase. The other thing that I'm going to send to you is a 26-page, and it is 26 pages, but it is good reading. It's Brookings, so Your stuff's pretty good. Thank you, Kenny McDonald, for sharing an essay from Brookings around minority business ownership and what increased minority business ownership can do in communities. And it's a great essay, and I think that it will prepare you for yet another document that we expect to come out. Kenny expects to come out probably during the time when you're off, but maybe when we begin. And it will take that data or that essay and the research that was done to compile that essay, and then look at 20 metro economies and metro cities, and we are one of them. And it will talk about what our minority business, really what our population is, where we have gaps, and there probably will be some prescriptive ideas about how to move forward. Maybe not a comprehensive set of prescriptive ideas, but I think this will be good information for us to read. If you go back to the small business topic that we had, and we did have a minority business owner on there, but this goes much deeper than that. And so this will be good work, as those work teams start to come up with their plans and their implementation strategies. So that is kind of where we're going with phase 2. Anything is subject to change, of course, after we talk to the mayor, council president, and Commissioner O'Grady, but I believe they will agree that this is kind of the next step forward. And we look forward to kind of, the work ahead, which is the real work. And then, of course, anytime that you all will need to bring speakers back or you need more information, we will all be able to assist in doing that as well. And you'll have a staffer on your work team. So more to come. Are there any questions kind of about the next phase? We're in it for the long haul, folks. Okay. So, I just summarized a lot. You're going to get an email with these materials, the links, the essay from Brookings. Hannah will send a meeting notice to hold March 10th on your calendar, and March 17th. That date may not be on a Wednesday at 3:30. It could be another day because we are going to be meeting with, or March 10th, I'm sorry, with a council member Hardin, John O'Grady, and Mayor Ginther. So that date could change based on their schedule, but I believe, Hannah, we're thinking March 17th will be at 3:30 on a Wednesday, correct? Okay, so everyone can hold that date for sure, and we will get the March 10th date to you as soon as we confirm it on the calendars of the leaders. Now I want to turn it over to Mike Stevens, and Mike wants to talk to you, I think, a little bit about some CARES Act funding. Mike?
Great, thanks, Christy. I'm going to use the last 15 minutes that we have, and hopefully have some dialogue, but also open it up so we can get some feedback after this meeting. I was giving the mayor a briefing on kind of the status of where we are as a group and the work that you've been doing. He's very appreciative of that. And one of the things he thought it would be great if we could get some input from this group on what we're calling CARES 2.0, but what we're anticipating is future stimulus dollars coming out of Washington here in the near future, very similar to the $157 million we got last year. So I'm going to share with the group kind of the breakdown of how we spent those dollars. Well, I got to get on my screen, bear with me. How we spent those dollars in 2020 and how we're trying to proactively plan on how we want to spend whatever money that comes in the near future that we're anticipating. So if you look at this chart, and hopefully people can see that, of the $157 million, about 77 of that went to city expenses. 25, just under 26 was what we call Recovery and Resiliency, really focused on small business institutions within the city, and then just under 55 million went to human services. So it gives you a breakdown. So at the start of the pandemic, and we knew we had dollars coming in last year, the mayor really wanted to focus on, one, fighting the health crisis, also making sure we addressed the human service crisis that we felt that was going to happen as a result of the pandemic, and then what were we going to do to address the needs of some of the small businesses and our anchor institutions within our community. So this is a good breakdown of how those dollars went out the door through those three categories. What we're looking at as we're starting to plan and take a proactive approach to the dollars we hope to get in this year, and we don't have the amount yet, and we don't know the restrictions, but we've got a good sense of it's going to be another significant amount, significant funding that we anticipate. So we want to keep our priorities obviously around continuing to support the small business needs, because it's really important that we look to fund how do we fuel the recovery, and what's that springboard to come out of that, and a lot of what we're talking about. We also know that it's important to have additional dollars to address food insecurity and housing insecurity. The mayor has had some conversations and is looking at what can we do for direct fiscal assistance to families in need, that really putting money in people's pockets to go out and hit meet their kind of their basic services as well. In addition to continuing to address the health crisis, we're also looking at childcare and education, like we did last year. We put over $6 million into childcare centers. We also are thinking and considering as a priority youth programming, as well as summer youth employment, and then community safety. So those are some of the priorities that we've been discussing. I share that with this group because you bring a great perspective on some of the gaps from last year's funding and some of the needs that still exist out there. That's really important that we start thinking about, instead of just going down and using the same model we used in 2020, what other areas do we need to focus on, and recommendations we need to make to the mayor on how we should spend these additional CARES dollars when they get determined and appropriated. So that's the purpose of kind of holding this group over for a couple more minutes to see if there's any additional insight on that, if there's questions. We have a email address for the Recovery and Resiliency Group, and Hannah, maybe you can throw that in the chat. So if you take some time and think about it, email it to that email address, or reach out to me, please, so we can talk about it. We're just trying to tap into the community and make sure that as we plan our 21 CARES dollars, it meets the greatest needs that we have out there.
Mike, I have a question. Do you expect this round of CARES dollars to have the same requirements in terms of spending and how fast the money needs to go out the door and be spent and those kinds of things? Does it have those same requirements?
No, we're actually anticipating it'll be a little bit different. We're doing a lot of work talking not only to the Biden administration, but to our elected, our representatives from Central Ohio on kind of what was successful last year and what was a challenge. I think that quick time frame to spend the money and turn around was challenging. We got an extension. So of the $5 million we still have remaining, we can that last through the end of the year. So we're asking for a little further extension of time, and then working through on what restrictions we might have. I will add, the city did receive, and hopefully you saw the news, a little over $26 million in essentially rental assistance and housing assistance dollars. We are programming the first 13 of that already. 10 is going to go to Impact Community Network. I think Bo was one of our presenters earlier, and continue to do the program, the Hope Fund they're using to get rental assistance out. These dollars are great because not only can they pay for money that people might have owed and missed on their rent payments, but it also can pay forward. So if you start a job and you need 6 months going forward, it can provide six up to 12 months of future rent as well. So we've got a significant amount of funding for housing dollars. $3 million. So I said there's 26. 10 is going to Impact. 3 is Celebrate One is working with their partners to make sure expectant mothers and their families can stay in their living situations and don't become homeless. But we haven't programmed the other 13 yet, and so that's in addition to the money we're anticipating getting, we've got additional 13 that we need to continue to program and meet the needs of the community.
Okay. Thank you. My two, you know, and obviously we will send emails and all of that, but the two things I would say, you know, I'll take the chair's seat, if you will, from the committee, is that whatever programs move out in terms of relief programs and those kinds of things, that there aren't a lot of, you know, so I'm going to use the word bureaucracy. There's not a lot of bureaucracy around it. That it moves fast, because you're moving it with organizations that you trust, that you have relationships with, that know how to do business with the city. And so, you know, a number of other requirements, you know, if it's a small business program, and I'm not saying that you do this, but we just want to be mindful that we continue this pace, because the pace that we were on, I think with the recovery money initially, you know, that worked well when you didn't have to, you know, I'm making this up, but if you got money for a business program, now you got to go through some kind of financial literacy to prove that your financial acumen is appropriate to run a business. You know, we just want to make sure that we don't put ourselves in situations where we end up harming people who are about to be harmed to get the money. So, you know, not trying to put a lot of, you know, belt and suspenders kinds of approaches to them. And then the other thing I would say is things that get people back to work quickly, because we're at that point now where people are going to be able to go back to work. We know that, you know, vaccinations are not as quick as we want. We've got to worry about the variant, all of those things. And, you know, so that does include childcare, not just workforce, but certainly childcare. And I know that there are a number of childcare advocates here, but we are hearing every day about, you know, the closures of sites, the loss of slots. Families, you know, are kind of starting to lose it. Even when after school care shuts down, people are having meltdowns, you know, because of a COVID outbreak, and you close after school care because the work requirements that people, you know, are trying to meet, whether they're in person or at home. So, you know, those would be the two things that I would say, or three, I guess, especially coming out of this committee and what we've learned thus far.
See, Mark got his hand up.
Yeah, can I just add two things? One, it would be great to see that slide of how the money was allocated and the restrictions that were initially placed on use of those funds. And if you have any anticipation on the restrictions of future funds, because it might be interesting for us, since the things we're learning is not only to take a look at what you all think worked and maybe didn't work as well as you'd hoped, but what was missing. And perhaps we all might have some ideas about what was missing. I mean, you know, Chrissy nailed it right there. It's like childcare, getting people to work. We got to get the kids some way to not be alone. So that's one thing. But it would be really nice to see that slide and what restrictions were placed then for the funding, and what you anticipate the restrictions might be on the new round of funding.
Yeah, we'll be happy to share it. We'll get that slide out to everybody. I can tell you the restrictions were pretty limited. You needed to be impacted by COVID, and you needed to have the money programmed to be spent by the end of the year initially, and that didn't change until the end of the year. We got the extension. So those were two of the big restrictions. You know, when we put the money out for the small business assistance initially, we focused on small businesses that were in low, moderate income neighborhoods was the priority. And we put a map out for the first 6 weeks, those businesses were the ones we were focusing on. We expanded it to the whole city after that. Then we were prioritized, you know, those micro businesses of 5 or less, but we also expanded that to others. But we'll get that. And you know, what we're trying to do is we work with the Biden administration and Congress is to encourage the least amount of restrictions as possible, because I think what Christy said, it's important to get these dollars out, so to keep people in their homes, to keep them fed, and give them those opportunities to get to work. And we know childcare is an important part of that, So I put 6.2 million out last year to try to help these providers who had lost revenue because of being shut down or the restrictions. And we'll continue to, I think we'll continue to move down that path as well.
Director Stevens,
may I comment, Mr. Stevens? I'm glad that you shared this information, which is a good news. From my experience from last year, from the last support, the survivors of domestic violence has been forgotten. There is a rise in domestic violence, and I don't see any support in that area. So really, it just comes to my mind to incorporate that because they are the strongest hit in the pandemic. And second one is a small business, especially in the refugee immigrant community, access to services, access to information, even filling out those applications, the bureaucrats, they are really frustrated how to benefit from those $1 million status distributors. So I think we can help on that because we have access to information, the trust, and that way that easily they can be benefited. We can help them how to tackle those bureaucratic and case management barriers. Workforce will be the biggest one because by then there's a lot of people to return back because of the vaccine, because of the improvement that we'll see during the summer. So I think we need a lot of investment on the workforce to bring people back to work. Those are really the priority. Of course, the youth employment summer programs are really worthwhile to consider.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that. That's great feedback.
Yeah, I'll email it to you too.
Stephanie, I saw your hand up.
Sure. Thank you, Director Stevens, for sharing that information. Chrissy, I hope you don't mind, but I just got off a conversation with President Commissioner O'Grady a couple of hours ago, and he and Director Bivens, and I don't think they would mind me sharing the fact that they're going to be looking at over the next couple of months, bringing people together to really look at all of these entities that are being funded by the county and are now talking about their work towards equity, because we need to see who's doing what and if there's duplication and whether or not, we have a bunch of people doing the same things and whether or not we're getting the results. But what was really important that we talked about was how do we reduce disparity, the disparities that exist that we've been talking about over the last couple of weeks. What Dr. Butler and Ms. Stacy just talked about, the disparities in education and access to education, the small businesses and all those different things, access to, the arts and all those things when you look at disparities. And so my hope is that when you guys look at the dissemination of this money, this time around, and I know it's about emergency and getting the money out, but I hope that we would look at how we as a community, if this is really about resiliency of our community long-term, that we need to make sure that there's measurable outcomes associated with the dissemination of this money that are going to help us 2 and 3 years down the road, as opposed to just a quick fix. Some of these things do need to be a quick fix. We know we got to keep people in their houses. We know we got to get people food, right? But there are some other, I think, opportunities with these funds to really hit on a lot of the topics that we've talked about in this community. But there needs to be, I think, really clear, measurable outcomes that we're going to be leaning towards in order for us to talk about and reduce some of these disparities that we've been talking about as well.
I appreciate that. I think that's right, especially because last year we reacted. I think we're trying to be a little more proactive and planning these dollars to have them be more impactful. So thank you. Candace, did I see you have a question, or I'm sorry, anybody else? Gina?
Yeah, Director Stevens, just to kind of hit on a point from earlier, I wanted to, in regards to the restrictions, I just wanted to make sure that for people who maybe got dollars last year, they're not being held out of potentially getting and receiving dollars this year. Because what we're seeing across the human services sector is that a lot of the human services organizations are being held from being able to be recipients of the PPP round 2. And by not being able to get that round 2, we're all really starting to see the impact of the significant losses month over month this year. So the need in the human services sector, I think, is kind of exponentially more coming into 2021 than it even was last year. And then the other thing about childcare and kind of the need to help fund childcare, I think that for the committee and for the dollars, it would be good for us to look at some of our families who are underemployed right now. They may still be working, but they're only getting 25 hours out of 40 or 20 hours out of 40 like they used to. And so what we are seeing is a significant trend of their benefits being pulled by the county because they are underemployed right now. So they only want to cover them for, say, 20 hours a week for benefits. But then if for some reason there's a call off at their work and they were wanting to work the 40 hours, they can't pay their provider the 40 hours because their benefits have already been cut to only cover their child care provider for up to 25 hours for that week.
Appreciate you sharing that. I can tell you on that first item, our intent is not to exclude those folks who previously received support, especially those human service agencies that were critical in helping us get the money out. So I don't anticipate that happening, and we'll make sure that as we move forward recommendations, we don't exclude that. We've run a little long. I'm here and available all the time. I think Hannah put my email out there. If we need to connect, we'll probably circle back, Christy, just so you know, as we come back in March, we might have a better idea of the money we're getting and how we're trying to prioritize getting it out, and we can give an update at that time as well.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Thank you all for hanging in there with us a little bit longer today, and we will see everyone back here on March the 10th, but you will get several emails from us with materials during the interim. So have a nice vacation, and we'll see you soon. Thank you very much for your time over the last 6 months or so.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks all.
Thanks.
For commitment.